Thank you for joining us on News Mongolia, where we bring you the latest stories and updates from across the nation and beyond. I'm Batsirin Namshir. On the News Mongolia tonight, Mongolian People's Party Parliamentary Group discusses legislative priorities in upcoming session. Democratic Party calls for transparency in Parliamentary Group meeting discussion. Mongolia's economy is projected to grow by 6.2% in 2024. For the news, stay tuned. In a recent session, the parliamentary group of the Mongolian People's Party convened to address crucial legislative matters set for discussion during the upcoming parliamentary session, scheduled to conclude before its break on January 20th.
Among the topics on the agenda were proposed amendments to the crime law, focusing on enhancing measures against corruption and bribery-related offenses. Members engaged in thorough discussions emphasizing the need for a robust legal framework to combat such crimes effectively. The draft law on child protection also received attention during the deliberations. Members examined the proposed legislation, highlighting the importance of safeguarding the rights and well-being of the nation's youth. Additionally, the parliamentary group addressed amendments to the bank law and shareholder regulations, aiming to refine the legal framework governing financial institutions and shareholders. Discussions reflected a commitment to fostering a stable and transparent financial sector. The issue of initial public offerings was also discussed, with members exploring potential legislative changes to streamline and enhance the IPO process, recognizing its significance and fostering economic growth and encouraging investment. As the parliamentary session approaches its break on January 20th, the Mongolian People's Party Parliamentary Group remains focused on ensuring a thorough examination of the proposed law drafts.
In a recent parliamentary group meeting, the Democratic Party addressed critical issues, focusing on corruption and budget embezzlement related to the purchase of 300 used old buses funded by the capital city's auto park renovation budget. The party proposed organizing an open hearing to address concerns surrounding the misuse of tax money and abuse of power in this context.
During the meeting, party members discussed the need for increased transparency in the allocation of funds, especially concerning the capital city's auto park renovation budget. The specific concerns revolved around the purchase of 300 used old buses, prompting the party to call for an open hearing to thoroughly examine any potential mismanagement of tax funds and misuse of power related to this procurement.
25 members of parliament officially signed a petition to organize open hearing on capital city auto park renovation purchase, or as you all know, the green buses case. It was submitted on November 29, 2023. According to the parliamentary session regulations, if the quota of the parliament's members support by providing signatures, the issue will be promptly discussed during the parliamentary session, regardless of other agenda items, and the temporary assessment and control committee should be formed.
Additionally, the Democratic Party demanded transparency in the COVID-19 period expenditures. Members emphasized the importance of making public all financial transactions and expenditures made during the pandemic to ensure accountability and address any potential issues related to the use of public funds during this critical period. The parliamentary group meeting highlighted the Democratic Party's commitment to promoting transparency, accountability, and good governance by addressing concerns related to corruption, budget embezzlement, and COVID-19 expenditures. The party aims to contribute to a more accountable and responsible government. The call for an open hearing underscores the party's dedication to thoroughly investigating and addressing issues that impact the efficient and ethical use of public resources.
Mongolia's economy is projected to grow by 6.2% in 2024 as the mining sector expands, private consumption recovers, and fiscal expansion stays strong, according to the World Bank's latest semi-annual Mongolia economic update.
In the first half of 2023, Mongolia's economy exhibited robust growth, primarily propelled by the mining sector. Early indicators suggest that this growth trend has persisted in the latter half of the year. Nevertheless, growth has been markedly uneven, with the non-mining sector trailing behind, underscoring the economy's heavy reliance on the mining sector and its heightened exposure to mining sector cycles. In the medium term, economic growth is expected to accelerate, averaging about 6% in 2025 to 2026, driven by substantial increase in mineral production as Ayutthala's 2023 mining production is anticipated to more than double by 2025. Yet significant downside risks persist. These risks encompass lower mineral exports prompted by slower than expected growth in China, as well as uncertainties on coal offtake agreements. Additional risks include inflationary pressures stemming from both further domestic fiscal expansion and heightened geopolitical tension in the Middle East, potentially resulting in higher oil prices. An analytical chapter focuses on Mongolia's trade opportunities in digital services, which could help diversify the country's economy. Mongolia's strongest opportunities to bolster its digital services growth and trade are in software development, telecommunications, and digital marketing. However, despite progress in telecommunications and internet penetration, considerable constraints remain in digital infrastructure, including slow network speeds, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and a shortage of highly skilled professionals. The report emphasizes the need for fiscal moderation to mitigate inflationary pressures and enhance macroeconomic stability, thereby stimulating private sector investment and bolstering global market confidence. In addition, the report recommends improving social protection efficiency to safeguard household consumption without spurring inflationary pressures. In the medium term, the report suggests rebuilding fiscal buffers to respond to shocks and create space for future investments, including under the new recovery policy. To promote economic diversification through digital services, the report advises enhancing digital infrastructure and establishing initiatives to upgrade digital skills.
Now let's take a look at the currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. Now, let's take a look at international news from our partner agencies. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the Saudi royals' winter camp outside the ancient incense route trading city of Al-Ula.
After the meeting, Blinken said that Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Turkey agreed to begin planning for the reconstruction and governance of Gaza once Israel's war against Hamas ends. On what is his fourth trip to the Mideast since the war began in October, Blinken said those countries were now open to such planning and that each would consider its own involvement in whatever is eventually decided upon. On this latest trip, Blinken had earlier visited Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Arab states have been highly critical of Israel's actions and have eschewed public support for long-term planning, arguing that the fighting must end before such discussions can begin. They have been demanding a ceasefire since mid-October as civilian casualties began to skyrocket. Israel has refused to agree to a ceasefire, and the U.S. has instead called for specified temporary humanitarian pauses to allow aid to get in and people to get to safety. Hamas' October 7th attack from Gaza into southern Israel triggered the war and killed around 1,200 people, and militants took some 250 others hostage. Israel's air, ground, and sea assault in Gaza has killed more than 22,000 people, two-thirds of them women and children, according to the health ministry in the Hamas-ruled territory. The account doesn't differentiate between civilians and combatants.
Pope Francis on Monday delivered a lengthy list of the ills afflicting humanity and the increasing violation of international humanitarian law that allows them in a foreign policy address to ambassadors accredited to the Holy See. Francis cited Russia's war in Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas war, migration, climate crisis, and the immoral production of nuclear and conventional weapons.
In his geopolitical roundup, Francis singled out Russia by name in noting that large-scale war waged by the Russian Federation against Ukraine had ground on. It marked an unusual break with Francis' usual tendency to spare Moscow direct public blame for the invasion when expressing solidarity with the Ukrainian people.
There is no conflict that does not end up in some way indiscriminately striking the civilian population. The events in Ukraine and Gaza are clear proof of this. We must not forget that grave violations of international humanitarian law are war crimes, and that it's not sufficient to point them out, but also necessary to prevent them. Consequently, there is a need for greater efforts on the part of the international community to defend and implement humanitarian law, which seems to be the only way to ensure the defense of human dignity in situations of warfare.
Francis was more balanced in his lament of Israel's ongoing war in Gaza, condemning Hamas' October 7th assault on southern Israel. At the same time, he said the attack provoked a strong Israeli military response that had left thousands dead and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He called for an immediate ceasefire, including Lebanon, the liberation of hostages held in Gaza, and reiterated the Holy See's position seeking a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians and an internationally guaranteed special status for Jerusalem. Francis also lamented various humanitarian and refugee crises in Africa and, without naming names, blasted military coups and elections in several African countries marked by corruption, intimidation, and violence. The Pope also called for the resumption as early as possible of Iran nuclear talks to ensure a safer future for all. Last month, the International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran had increased the rate of which it is producing near-weapons-grade uranium, reversing a previous slowdown. Francis also said that the manufacturing of nuclear weapons was just as immoral as the possession and use of them. Francis has already changed church teaching to include the possession of nuclear weapons as inadmissible, but on Monday included the production of such weapons as part of his overall criticism of the weapons industry.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast for the world major cities and Mongolia. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you on Wednesday with more news and updates. Goodbye.